My name is Leonard Weston. I'm 56 years old. And 7 months ago, my daughter stood at the end of the upstairs hallway in her Oakville home and told me that if I wasn't going to help out around the house, I should find somewhere else to stay. I had been sleeping in her guest room for 4 months. I had shoveled her driveway through 7 snowfalls without being asked. I had watched my grandchildren 3 days a week, sometimes 4. I had driven to the No Frills on Dundas every Monday because my son-in-law didn't like the Loblaws that was 5 minutes closer. The night my daughter said those words to me, I didn't raise my voice. I went to the guest room, pulled my suitcase from the closet, and packed with steady hands. 6 days later, 38 missed calls. Before I tell you what happened after that, let me take you back to the spring. To the Tuesday afternoon, I answered the phone and heard my daughter's voice, warm, certain, the way it always sounds when she's already made up her mind. Dad, come stay with us. You don't need to rattle around that house alone anymore. My wife Jean had passed 11 months before that call. Pancreatic cancer, the kind that doesn't give you time to prepare. We'd had 31 years together in a 2-story on Frontenac Street in Kingston. A backyard garden she'd kept since the girls were small. A garage where I'd built a woodworking shop that still smelled like cedar and linseed oil even though I hadn't touched a tool since she got sick. I'd spent the last year of her life in hospitals, and the year after, in a house that had gone quiet in a way I couldn't find the bottom of. I agreed to the sale before I fully understood what agreeing meant. When the offer came in, 2 buyers from Toronto paid over asking without a second showing. I told myself it was practical. The house was too much for one person. The winters were long. My daughter and her husband had the room, and the kids were still young enough that having their grandfather close would mean something. I believed that completely. I want to be honest about that. I believed it. I timed the drive to Oakville on a Saturday morning in early April to miss the worst of the 401 traffic, and I pulled into their driveway just after noon. The house was newer construction. 4 bedrooms, 2-car garage, a backyard with a playset, and a gas barbecue still wearing a vinyl tarp with the price tag on it. My son-in-law came out to meet me. He shook my hand the way men shake hands at job interviews. Firm, practiced, a smile that had been useful at many first impressions before mine. Good to have you here, Len. Make yourself at home. My daughter hugged me and showed me upstairs. The guest room was the smallest of the 4 bedrooms, at the back of the upper hall, tucked between the children's rooms. So convenient, she said, turning on the lamp. If Emmett or Paige wake up at night, you're right there. I thought she meant it was considerate to put a grandfather close to his grandchildren. I was still thinking that at the end of month 1, it took me until month 3 to understand she'd been describing a job posting. The first week, I fell into the rhythms of the house the way you fall into anything that seems natural, without deciding to. I'd cooked for a household for years. Emmett was 5 and loud at breakfast. Paige was 3 and needed someone to sit with her through the morning, or she wouldn't eat. My daughter left for work at 7:15. My son-in-law left at 7:30. I was already awake. 32 years of early school bells don't leave you even after the bells stop, so I got the kids their cereal. It felt like the natural thing to do. It stayed natural for about a week and a half. After that, it became the arrangement. Nobody announced the arrangement. There was no conversation where anyone said, "This is what we need from you." But one Thursday, my daughter texted me from her office at 8:40 to ask if I could take Paige to a doctor's appointment at 10. Then Friday she mentioned, while I was making coffee, that the sitter was away all of next week, so it would just be me with the kids Monday through Wednesday. Then my son-in-law handed me a grocery list on a Sunday evening, a full list, specific brands circled in yellow marker. The No Frills on Dundas carries everything here. Better prices than the Loblaws. He said it the way a manager briefs someone on their first shift. I drove there Monday morning. I paid for the groceries myself. $211. I remember the amount because I stood at the self-checkout thinking, I'll sort this out later. I never did. It happened again the following week, and the week after that. By December I had stopped keeping track, which I now understand was the point at which I had accepted the arrangement in full. By the second month, the pattern had settled in with the particular firmness of things that are never spoken aloud. I was watching the children 4 days a week. I was doing the Monday grocery run. I had shoveled the driveway after every snowfall, and that winter had 4 before Christmas. I had signed up for a pottery class at the Burlington Seniors Center on Wednesday evenings, something I'd been meaning to do since I moved, a small piece of something that was mine. I went twice. The third Wednesday, my daughter called at 4:15. The sitter had canceled. My son-in-law had a client dinner. Could I stay? I stayed. I paid for that month's sessions whether I attended or not. I never went back. What I remember most clearly about those months is how much of it happened without anyone being unkind. My son-in-law was never rude. My daughter was genuinely, exhaustingly busy, and she spoke to me with the kind of affection that assumes you're fine because you haven't said otherwise. It's a particular kind of invisible, not hostile, just assumed. One evening in November, my son-in-law had 3 colleagues over to watch the game. I'd put together a spread in the kitchen: chips, old cheddar from the deli block, some cold cuts, the leftover chicken soup I'd made the night before reheated in a pot. I hadn't planned it as anything formal. I just saw people were coming and did what I'd always done. At one point, my son-in-law's colleague Daryl wandered to the kitchen doorway and looked at the food on the counter with genuine appreciation. "Who put all this together?" My son-in-law's voice came from the living room, easy and certain. "Oh, that's my father-in-law. He's been a lifesaver with the kids, loves being useful." I was standing 4 feet away, loading dishes into the dishwasher. Loves being useful. Not, he's generous with his time. Not, he's done more than we could have asked. Useful. The word a person uses for an appliance that's been performing well. I called my old friend Wanda that night. We'd been friends for years. She and Jean had been close since the girls were small, and she'd stayed in touch after Jean died the way only certain people do, without making a production of their own goodness. She'd known me long enough to skip the preamble. "You're not overreading it," she said when I finished. "You've been in rooms full of teenagers for 30 years. You know when something's off." She was right. I did know. I just hadn't let myself say it clearly yet. The month before everything came apart, my son-in-law got the contract. It was a commercial development in Hamilton his firm had been working toward for 2 years. His name on the project, significant money attached, the kind of milestone that changes the conversation at dinner parties. My daughter texted me that Tuesday afternoon with 3 exclamation marks. By that evening, a dinner party had been planned for the following Saturday. 12 guests. Partners from the firm, the lead client, close friends. My daughter wanted the house to say something. She wanted the evening to land as, "We have arrived." She came to me Thursday morning with a mug of tea and a printed menu. I should have recognized what the mug of tea meant. 6 dishes: rack of lamb, potato gratin, roasted root vegetables, green salad with candied pecans, stuffed mushrooms as a starter, and creme brulee for dessert. I read it twice. I hadn't been asked what I could make, or whether 6 courses for 12 people was a reasonable request of one person working alone. I had been handed the expected outcome and trusted to produce it. "And could you keep the kids upstairs while the guests are here?" my daughter added, still in the voice she used for easy requests. "It'll be a lot for them with 12 adults. Keep the kids upstairs." I had cooked in that kitchen for 4 months. I had made every weekday breakfast, most of the dinners, every Sunday meal, and the night of the biggest party they had ever hosted, I was being asked to spend the evening invisible on the 2nd floor with a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old. "Will I be eating with the guests?" I asked. She looked at her mug. "Troy's colleagues don't really know you, Dad. It might feel a bit awkward." I picked up the printed menu. "All right," I said. But something moved in me when I said it. The kind of thing that moves once and doesn't come back. If you've ever been in a place where you kept telling yourself just a little longer, where you said it every week and then looked up and realized you'd been saying it for months, leave me a comment. I want to know I'm not the only one. And if this story is reaching something in you, share it with someone who might need to hear it. Now let me take you to Friday, because that's the day the real shape of things became clear to me. Wanda called Friday afternoon. She was in Oakville visiting her son. She'd driven down from Kingston 2 days earlier, the way Wanda did things, practically and without fuss. We met at the Tim Hortons on Kerr Street and sat in a window booth for almost 2 hours. I told her everything. Not just the facts, the grocery bills, the pottery class I'd stopped attending, the spread my son-in-law had described to his colleague without looking at me. But what was underneath all of it? The particular loneliness of a man who had spent his career teaching teenagers to build things with their own hands, who had raised 2 daughters in a house that ran on love and consistent effort. and who had driven to Oakville in good faith and found himself assigned a role he'd never been asked to accept. Wanda listened without interrupting and without fixing. When I finished, she set down her coffee and said, "Len, you are not the au pair, you are her father." Simple sentence, but the right one. We were finishing our coffees when my daughter pulled up to collect me. She'd insisted on picking me up, said she had errands nearby. She came in and met Wanda, and the two of them chatted warmly for 10 minutes with the ease of people who, in their different ways, loved the same person. As we were getting up to leave, my daughter turned. "Wanda, are you busy tomorrow night? We're having people over to celebrate Troy's contract. You should come." Wanda looked at me. I gave the smallest nod. "I'd love that," Wanda said. In the car, my daughter talked about the flowers she'd ordered and the tablecloth she'd borrowed from her neighbor down the street. She didn't know she had just invited the one person in Oakville who understood exactly what had been happening in her house for 4 months. That night she came to the kitchen at 9 while I was doing my prep. Lamb already in the marinade, mushroom filling ready, gratin assembled and in the fridge. She stood near the island with her arms crossed, not quite meeting my eyes, and spoke carefully. "Dad, tomorrow is really important for Troy. For us. I need everything to go smoothly. That means I need you focused on the food. Just the kitchen. Don't come out to the living room while the guests are there." I set down the knife I'd been using. "Sharon." I stopped. Wrong daughter. I hadn't mixed up their names in years. My daughter didn't seem to notice, or she noticed and said nothing. "If you're not comfortable with it," she continued, "if it's going to be too much, maybe you should go stay somewhere else this weekend. Take a little break." Take a little break. She had packaged it as consideration, as though she were doing me a kindness. I looked at my daughter for a long moment. I thought about Wanda sitting in that Tim Hortons booth, saying, "You are her father." I thought about the pottery class, and the grocery list, and 32 years of reading a room. "I understand," I said. I walked down the hall to the guest room and closed the door. At 11 o'clock, I took the suitcase from the closet for the first time since April. I didn't slam it onto the bed. I opened it flat and packed the way I always packed. Methodical, unhurried, everything in its place. Jean always said I could be ready to go anywhere in 20 minutes. I was out in 18. Before I left, I went to the kitchen. The lamb was in the marinade. The gratin was wrapped and waiting in the fridge. I turned off the oven light and left everything as it was. I took the grocery list, the one with the circled yellow brands, the one my son-in-law had handed me the Sunday before last, off the corkboard by the fridge. I set it on the counter. On top of it, I placed a piece of notepaper folded once. One sentence. I was glad to help when it was asked. It was never asked. I left the spare key beside the note. I left the house at 6:50 in the morning. The driveway was clear. I had shoveled it 2 days earlier after the last snowfall. The drive to the hotel took 9 minutes. I checked in, rode the elevator to the 4th floor, sat on the edge of the bed, and turned my phone off. For the first time in 4 months, there was no list, no schedule, nobody needing anything from me in the next 10 minutes. I sat in the quiet and breathed slowly, all the way down. The kind of breath you take when you finally understand how long you've been holding the previous one. At 6 o'clock, 12 guests arrived at the house. I know this because Wanda told me everything the following morning over breakfast at the diner on Lakeshore. The kitchen was cold. The lamb was on the counter, raw. The potato gratin was still in the fridge. The printed 6-inch menu was on the island. My daughter had found the note. She'd read it while standing at the counter, and then she'd sat on a kitchen stool and read it again. By 6:30, they'd ordered from the Japanese restaurant on the app. Bento boxes and sushi platters and edamame that arrived in 4 flat bags and covered the kitchen island. Wanda arrived at 6:15, looked at the house, and understood immediately. She set her bottle of Riesling on the side table and waited. My son-in-law worked the room the way he always did, hand extended, voice easy, the practiced warmth of a man who understood the value of a first impression. His lead client, Kenneth Park, arrived just after 6:30. Quiet man, 50s, silver hair, the kind of self-contained calm that fills a room without demanding it. He looked at the takeout containers, at the paper napkins someone had found in a junk drawer, and smiled politely. "Change of plans?" he asked. My son-in-law said, keeping it casual, more relaxed this way. Kenneth nodded. A moment passed. Then genuinely, Christine mentioned her father had been staying here, helping with the kids. Is he joining us tonight? My son-in-law's smile didn't move. He stepped out for the weekend, needed a break. Wanda was 6 feet away. She heard every word. Kenneth said, he just moved here from Kingston, didn't he? Retired teacher? Shop teacher, Wanda said from where she was sitting, quietly, without performance. The small cluster of people near the fireplace went still. The way rooms go still when someone says something true in a space that has been waiting for it. Kenneth looked at her. Friend of the family? Friend of Len's, 20 years. She set her glass on the coffee table. He left this morning, actually. He's at a hotel nearby. A pause, unhurried. Last night, Christine told him he could either stay in the kitchen during the party or take the weekend somewhere else. He packed and left. The room absorbed it. That's the only word for what happened. It didn't gasp. It absorbed, the way a room does when someone names a true thing that has been present but unnamed. My son-in-law's jaw moved once. My daughter had crossed the room and was standing just outside the circle, very still. Wanda didn't raise her voice or look at either of them. She spoke directly to Kenneth, simply and without decoration. Len Weston is one of the most decent people I know. I didn't want the wrong version of tonight to be the only one anyone remembered. Kenneth didn't respond to my son-in-law after that. He nodded once, set his glass down, and turned toward the windows. He stayed another 40 minutes. He shook my son-in-law's hand at the door with the same warmth he'd arrived with, which told my son-in-law nothing and everything. Some things you can manage. The impression you leave on someone who has just heard the truth is not one of them. I turned my phone on Sunday morning. The screen took a moment to settle before the notifications organized themselves into meaning. 38. 14 from my daughter. 9 from my son-in-law. That surprised me. 4 from numbers I didn't recognize. 1 from Wanda. Breakfast tomorrow. I'll tell you everything. You're all right. And 1 from my other daughter, Sharon, who had called from Fredericton at 11 the night before. Dad, I have a spare room and a dog who already likes you. Call me when you're up. I lay on the hotel bed and looked at the ceiling. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel relieved exactly. I felt the quiet of someone who has done the difficult, honest thing, and is now sitting with the aftermath of it. That has its own texture. It's not light, but it's clean. I called Sharon first. She answered on the second ring, the unhurried steadiness of someone who had spent 12 years as a paramedic and treated every call as though it might matter without letting it frighten her. You okay? I'm okay. Good. Do you want me to call Christine or do you want to handle that yourself? I'll do it. Not yet. Fair enough. Take your time. That was Sharon. No drama, no argument, no are you sure. She trusted me to know my own mind. The following Wednesday, I signed a lease on a 1-bedroom apartment in Burlington. 7th floor. A window in the kitchen with a view toward the escarpment. Not large, 640 square feet, but the dishes in the sink would be mine, and the quiet would be mine, and the schedule would be mine. Sharon flew in the weekend after and tried to fill the apartment faster than I wanted to. A side table, a coat rack, a floor plant she'd spotted at the Home Sense on Brant. I kept telling her, not yet. I want to fill it at the pace I actually live. I want to know what I need before I acquire it. At the hardware store on Plains Road, I stopped at a pegboard display near the entrance. A set of hand tools, dovetail saw, a pair of chisels, a marking gauge, the same kind I'd had in my garage on Frontenac Street. I bought them. I put them up on a strip of pegboard above the work table I'd set up in the second bedroom. Not the same tools, but mine. My daughter found me on a Thursday afternoon 3 weeks after the party. She'd gotten the hotel name from Sharon, and learned there I'd already moved on. Sharon had given her the address. I buzzed her up. We sat at the kitchen table. She was holding the note I'd left on the counter. The fold had gone soft from being opened and closed many times. She sat down without preparing anything. No speech, no strategic opening. She looked at me and said, "Dad, I'm sorry." I waited. 32 years of teaching had taught me that what fills the silence after an apology tells you more than the apology itself. "What are you sorry for?" I asked. She took a slow breath. "I saw what was useful about you being there, and I told myself that was the same as being happy you were there. And I stopped checking. Whether you were okay, whether any of it was okay." She stopped, then quieter. I was scared to slow down enough to actually look. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I had watched my daughter for 29 years, And I understood something in that moment with a clarity I hadn't had before. The harm she had done me wasn't cruelty. It was fear. Fear of what she might find if she looked carefully at her own life. I didn't know yet exactly what she was afraid of, but I believed her when she said she was starting to. I love you, I said. That hasn't changed, but I won't live that way again. Not for anyone. She nodded. She didn't argue. That was something. The call from my son-in-law came Friday evening. I was in the chair by the window with a cup of coffee and a woodworking book I'd found at a used shop on Locust Street. When his name appeared on the screen, I held the phone for a moment before answering. He didn't call me Len, he said Mr. Weston. 3 months in his house, and it had always been Len. Mr. Weston landed differently, more formal, more honest about what the relationship had actually been. He didn't apologize. I hadn't expected him to. Men like my son-in-law don't often have that vocabulary ready when it applies to themselves. But he was quiet in a way I hadn't heard from him before. The quiet of someone sitting with something uncomfortable and not quite knowing how to put it down. I didn't think it would go this way, he said. I know, I said. A pause. I thought about leaving it there, but there was something I'd wanted to say, and the moment was open. The thing I care about most isn't what happened between you and me, I said. It's that my daughter felt she had to manage you, rather than just talk to me. That's what I'm asking you to sit with. The line was quiet for a moment, then it clicked. He didn't call back. I didn't expect him to, but I meant what I said, and I believe, the way you believe things you can't prove, that it landed somewhere. Not because he was ready to hear it, but because certain things, said plainly, don't fully disappear. I finished my coffee. I went back to my book. On the last Tuesday of March, I walked into the Burlington Seniors Center at 6:15. The woodworking group met in a back room that smelled the way woodworking rooms always smell. Sawdust and linseed oil, and the particular focus of people doing something with their hands. 7 men around a long workbench, projects at different stages. Someone had a radio on low in the corner, a hockey game just finishing its second period. The organizer, a retired contractor named Bill, who had the hands of a man who'd been working with them for 50 years, extended his hand when I came through the door. You said on the phone you've done this before. Had a shop, I said. Had to leave it behind when I moved. He handed me a pair of safety glasses. Then you already know the best part. What's that? He picked up a piece of maple from the rack and turned it over slowly. The wood doesn't ask where you've been. It just responds to how you work it now. I sat down. I pulled on the glasses. I found a piece of white oak with good grain and the right weight. I ran my thumb along it to feel the direction of the fiber. I found the angle of the light, and I began. Not useful to anyone's schedule. Not filling a role I'd never agreed to take. Not managing someone else's expectations of what the evening should look like. Simply present, with my hands on wood and my mind on the work. That was enough. It was more than enough. What I understand now, looking back from a kitchen with a view of the escarpment and a set of chisels hanging on a pegboard above my own work table, is this. I confuse being needed with being loved. Those two things can live together in the same house. In a good family, they usually do. But they are not the same thing, and when one quietly replaces the other, what remains isn't love. It's a system. A system that runs on the assumption that the person who doesn't complain has no complaints. I spent 4 months making myself useful because I mistook that weight of being depended on, of being the person who showed up, for the warmth of being wanted. After Jean died and the house went quiet, and the school no longer needed me every September morning, I had confused the feeling of being necessary for the feeling of belonging. It took one sentence, said at the end of a hallway by someone who loves me, but had stopped seeing me, to make the difference plain. I don't regret driving to Oakville. I don't even regret the 4 months entirely. They taught me that at 56, there is still something in me that knows when to pick up the suitcase and go. That the life I want to live is one I choose, at the pace I actually live, filled only with what I've decided to keep. Before I go, I want to ask you one thing. Leave it in the comments. If you had been in my position the night my daughter said those words in the hallway, would you have stayed, or would you have packed? There's no wrong answer. But I think the one that comes to you first, without thinking about it, says something real. And if any part of this story stayed with you, there are more in the description below. Thank you for being here.